her spouse.
Wives, the husband bashers.
Shocks in new report.
And inside, they were beating up the results of a survey conducted in far-off London.
18% of men have suffered abuse by their partners, compared with 13% of women.
In Darwin, the figures might be a little different. And didn't the Mardi Gras bring the journalistic poofter-bashers out of the closet? David Bentley in the Courier Mail.
If I need to see a procession of costumed homosexuals, I'll hang around the corridors at the ABC for a while.
Paul Gray in the Herald Sun.
There is an old joke that most people will support tolerance towards homosexuality until the day it's made compulsory. Seems at the ABC that day's not far away.
And Frank Devine in the Oz thinks they have a better class of poof back where he used to edit a Murdoch tabloid.
Gay style permeates New York. New York gays don't bore their fellow citizens with assertive silliness, nor is there an institution as boring and silly as the ABC to tempt them.
But you watched, Frank, didn't you? Speaking of watching, it doesn't do to contemplate what the Nine Network does to a story as the day wears on. We began watching at 6 a.m. when Nine runs an English bulletin pulled down from the satellite.
With girls as young as 13, Ben Ando looks at whether the fashion business is promoting harmful role models for adolescent girls.
Gianna Albertoni Vicendi is taking the fashion world by storm. It's said Giorgio Armani described her as the most beautiful woman he'd seen in years. But she's just 13, and many say it's wrong for girls this young to be used to sell clothes aimed at adults.
The story was of the lightest possible weight, one of those enders, and included a few words from someone described as an agony aunt.
Then it's a very negative message indeed.
That British report ran shortly before 6:30 a.m. 17 minutes later, in Nine's own bulletin, they ran it again, but this time revoiced by their man in London, who they pretended was in Milan.
Models as young as 13.
Giorgio Armani calls her the most beautiful woman he's seen in years. But Gianna Albertoni Vicendi is hardly a woman at all. She's 13 years old.
And the agony aunt had become a
Fashion commentator.
But that's not all. The story was still running that night, dressed up even further.
A new catwalk star who's barely a teenager.
Giorgio Armani calls her the most beautiful woman he's seen in years.
And the agony aunt turned fashion commentator was now a
Social commentator.
And so important was this nothingness that Nine's esteemed foreign correspondent and crew were dispatched to a suitable location for a piece to camera.
Many of the catwalk glamour queens are not yet old enough to stop by for a drink.
If that's the tarting up they'll do on something of such insubstantiality, think what they'd do to a story that mattered. Last for this week, putting the record straight at the Sydney Morning Herald. The newspaper, whose self-importance is about all it preserves from the glory days, front page's fan mag trivia about the Rolling Stones coming to Australia.
Oh, I love the joint.
Says Richards of Australia.
The last show at that Sydney racetrack, I was on this incredible acid.
Which gets the approving headline,
Stoned. 500,000 watts plus Charlie.
and this from the Herald went uncorrected.
The Dutch-born Mrs. Anita Keating in The Hague.
No, Amsterdam. Again from the front page, a rugby league story referring to
Defending premiers, Brisbane.
no, Canberra. But that too went uncorrected. The newspaper, though, insists that we correct last week's Media Watch reference to this story as plagiarism. Ms. Lamont does not contest that the story was almost entirely lifted from the English Independent, and as her deputy editor John Lyons agrees, the story carried the byline of Leonie Lamont and nothing else.
However, that night in the sub-editing process, her inclusion of the overseas attribution, which showed it was a joint effort, and her byline became a tagline with the attribution removed.
So, according to the Herald, it wasn't Ms. Lamont who falsely claimed authorship of someone else's work. That misrepresentation came from the paper itself. We're sorry, Miss Lamont, that your subs dropped you in it like that, but you and your editors never corrected it, did you? Perhaps hoping no one will notice is not consistent with journalistic responsibility. The Herald surely doesn't expect readers, like us, to ring reporters each time to check that their bylines were deserved. We commend to you the regular corrections column in the New York Times. They don't wait for their mistakes to be discovered. That's long overdue. Good night to you.
Join us at the National Press Club in Canberra this week as Paul Keating faces questions from student representatives from around Australia. Don't miss the Youth Press Conference with the Prime Minister, Wednesday afternoon on ABC.